Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Very warm welcome, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for part one of our two-part webinar series. I'm Karen Kreling. I'm the Business Development Manager at the Pragma Academy, and I'll be your host for the session today. I'm very pleased to welcome my guests, Arnold, Tim, and Rosa, all subject matter experts in their own rights, and I'm sure you'll glean much information from them during the session today. I'll introduce them to you shortly, but we'll first provide a quick overview of how this webinar session will run. So we'll start off, we're going to share a presentation and a lot of information during the session. We will refer to real life clients and projects, but in the interest of client confidentiality, we will refrain from mentioning their names. We've set up a mentee survey with 2 short questions. These questions will come up during the webinar session. You can log on to mentee.com on your cell phones or on your computers and key in the code that you'll see. Tim, if you could move one screen on, you'll see that there's a mentee screen and code. The code is 624997, and your feedback on these questions will be much appreciated. You're also welcome to pose questions during the session. We're very interested to hear what you have to say, but in terms of being mindful of everyone's time, I'll ask you to please type your questions into the chat box. You'll see that there's a little chat box next to the participants symbol. Please type your questions there. We'll keep track, and if there are any questions at the end of the session, we will address them. We'll also share information on a blog so that everybody can have sight of what those questions were. So please keep your microphones muted and your cameras off throughout the webinar. Remember to type your question rather than raise your hand. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our guests and kick off with our webinar session. Arnold Botha is the MD of the Pragma Academy, and he's the co-founder of Pragma. Arnold's got 38 years of asset management experience, so we're really lucky to have him on our panel today and share his insight. His experience is a combination of execution and consulting training roles within the asset management space. Tim Bevan is a professional engineer that has, Arnold, can you hear me? And welcome, Arnold.
Just unmute. Yeah. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining. Thanks, Karen, for the introduction. I'll talk to you later.
Pleasure. Tim Bevan is a professional engineer that has 30 years of asset management experience and has been intricately involved in the delivery of our asset management training programs for the past 5 years. And Tim currently heads up the rollout of our maintenance planner occupational qualification, so he has his hands full. Welcome, Tim, and thanks for driving our presentation for us today.
Pleasure, Karen. Okay, hello, everybody. Hi, thanks.
Then finally, we have Rosa Steele. Rosa, qualified learning and development practitioner with over 15 years of experience in designing, developing, and delivering learning programs in different industries. So we're very lucky to have her as part of our team. Rosa currently oversees our operational space within the Academy, and her primary focus is implementing of our learning programs. So welcome, Rosa. And welcome everybody else in the audience. And we're going to move on. I'm going to switch off my camera as well to save bandwidth, and we're going to jump right into our interview. So since joining Pragma, I've realized that people outside the physical asset management space are actually quite surprised at what a diverse and interesting field this is. I often find myself explaining to people that asset management isn't just about wielding a screwdriver or replacing a pump. In fact, it's not just about maintenance. I've learned that there's a lot of analysis, planning, decision-making involved, and making this a very complex field, a field with immense potential value to organizations and actually the world at large. But is it true, Arnold, that the broader holistic view of asset management has been relatively neglected area in terms of general education and training?
Karen, you're absolutely spot on. Asset management is about that life cycle that's shown there on the screen, from the conceptualization, shall we say, the selection, acquisition, operation, maintenance, as well as the decommissioning of assets, in a way that would optimize those three things at the bottom: the cost of the asset, the performance, and the risk associated, actually not only with that asset, but with the whole asset portfolio. One can say that asset management is as old as the invention of the wheel, but it has become quite complicated over the years as our assets have become technologically more advanced and sophisticated. In addition, with the pressure on available funds, organizations can't replace assets as frequently as they would like to, and therefore we sit with aging assets and associated performance problems, and therefore the need for proper asset management has become greater. And we can also say that the need for training has never been as acute as it is at the moment. And more organizations are therefore focusing on training in asset management.
Yes, it certainly makes sense that organizations are under pressure to extend the life of their assets. And obviously, hand in hand with that goes the skills within those teams managing the assets. So then that brings me to the question, can you tell us how the larger, more mature organizations would tackle this problem?
Now, Karen, we see that these larger organizations, let's say the more mature asset-intensive organizations, follow a definite, let's call it a holistic approach to asset management and training, consisting of a few things. The first thing, as you can see there on the left-hand side, is they develop a blueprint. This is a document that would spell out how asset management would be done in that organization. Call it a framework, policy statement, or a manual. They have different names for it. So that's the first thing. So they interpret all the knowledge that's out there, even ISO 55000, and develop this document. Now, the next step is to get people to use this document, and therefore they embark on a company-wide change management program supported by extensive training, like the one you can see there, which is depicted in the form of a roadmap. And all along the way, there's training. So there's some training up front to get awareness, and then there's training along the way to create skills. And often we find that it's the middle management who are the key change agents in this program. And therefore, very much of our training focuses on them, and also some handholding to guide the organization through this process.
Yeah, I can see that this could use some hand-holding, potentially relatively complex, and yet again, bringing to my attention that it's not very straightforward. It does require some expertise. But in order to make it a little bit more practical, can you give us an example of such a training program, Arnold?
Yes, we've been working with a few large organizations, but the one that I'd like to share with the audience today is a specific professional development program that we're running for a large mining group. And in this program, we're training the engineering managers, the section engineers, reliability engineers, and engineering specialists in that blueprint that they have developed. And as you can see on the program, let me just quickly talk it through the blocks. First of all, we onboard them because we do all of this training on the learning management system. There's some upfront work. And then we have two contact sessions, the two blue blocks, where they learn certain aspects of asset management with a specific focus on their own blueprint. And in between the two contact sessions, they must go and identify a project, an improvement project, and they present that to a panel of senior managers after the second session. And then they've got 3 months to implement this program to, this project that they do, this improvement project. And that way they deliver value, but they also apply what they've learned. So it's almost a double value that they get from that process.
Yeah, definitely does sound like a double benefit. I mean, you are upskilling teams, and so putting new skills in place, but then there's the benefit of savings. How substantial savings are we looking at in this instance?
Yeah, it's very substantial. And like you said in the beginning, we don't want to quote exact numbers, but I think it's suffice to say that it's over 600% return on investment on the training costs. And we've been running this program now for a few years, and every year it's almost a no-brainer because the training pays for itself. And like you said, in addition to providing the people with the competence and the confidence, it's it's a self-sustaining program.
Yeah, it really is a fantastic example. Sounds really amazing. So then, as you say, it's been running for a few years, and along came COVID and threw everybody's plans upside down. How was this training affected by the COVID lockdown and obviously the travel restrictions?
Yeah, we all had a few nervous weeks thinking about it. But luckily, we've had some experience in the past about running online learning. So we made the switch to virtual classrooms, tested it out with a few select managers, and they were happy. And since then, we've delivering it in a virtual classroom environment very, very successfully.
No, that's excellent, Arnold. Would you say that the learners are thinking it's as excellent? Are they as comfortable in the virtual classroom as in the physical classroom?
Yes, absolutely. Maybe just to show or to talk through the slide that's on the screen. The platform we use is called Big Blue Button, and it allows you a variety of, let's say, classroom-like functionalities. And the feedback we've had from the learners is that some of them found it even more engaging than before. And one person said, well, he can't see why we should ever go back to a real classroom. So it's been very, very successful from that point of view.
No, that's excellent. I know we're going to unpack that a lot more in our virtual classroom session in part 2 of this webinar. So I'm going to leave it at that. And I want to take you back to the beginning where you said companies are taking a more holistic approach to training, which is very much an approach I like. But can you explain to us a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, Corin, like I said, their approach is to view it as an ongoing journey. But maybe just from changes we've made in the academy, a couple of years ago, we sold training courses off a catalog, and I think organizations bought loose standing courses, sent people on training courses that looked interesting. But with that approach, now more, let's call it a holistic approach linked to a roadmap, we also made some changes. So we decided that we would assist organizations, like it's shown there, the first block, to define specific roles, competencies, and learning pathways for individuals, so that we can end up identifying the training courses that would apply to that specific person. And our clients have been over the moon with this approach, because now they can clearly see which training courses are applicable to which people. And then just going through this model, then we also customized it. Like I said, if they've got a specific blueprint with terminology and sequence of events, we would then adjust our training or localize our training to talk that same language. So it's not generic asset management, but it talks very much to that roadmap and that blueprint that the organization has. And then if we look at blocks 3 and 4, that's where we talk about blended learning via our learning management system. And again, we introduced that a couple of years ago, and that has now been extremely helpful with the COVID, like I explained earlier. And then just the last block is, so maybe just the blended learning that is now extended over a period of time, small bite-sized chunks with application in between. And then the last block is where people go back to the workplace and they apply it, like I explained earlier. So if you think back on the roadmap, people get learning along the way when they need it for the people who need it, and they then go back and apply it in a specific workplace application. And I think both for them and for us, this makes much more sense. Like I said, a more holistic approach to training.
Yeah, I can definitely see that makes a lot of sense, and adds a lot of value to the business to have a planned training approach. And coming from a learning background myself, certainly it can add value to your entire organization. So do we have learning pathways for all asset management positions within an organization?
Yeah, Karen, we have developed a few sort of the standard roles in the maintenance organization, typically the maintenance manager, the maintenance foreman, the maintenance planner, reliability engineer, etc. And we have then customized, or we customize or adjust that according to a client's specific requirements to fit in with their structure and their role allocation. So that's normally some work we would do on site with them. But the one that I'd like to share with everybody is just the reliability engineer. We've been focusing a lot on reliability engineers, both internally and at clients recently. It seems to be a new trend. So at the top, those 5 blocks depict the typical roles for a reliability engineer. Obviously, behind this, there's a detailed job description that fleshes that out. And here at the bottom, you can see sort of a high-level summary of the competencies required by a reliability engineer. And this also links back behind it to a detailed competency framework. But that's typically, so if you look at the reliability engineer, that's what they should do. And these are the skills they should have. If you just move on to the next slide. And based on that, we've now put together a learning pathway for a reliability engineer consisting of those courses. So some people have attended these courses before, then they can skip them. And it also gives a logical sequence. So if you have done, let's say, the landscape, the next obvious course to do then is reliability engineering in practice. And again, our clients have found this very useful because there's such a variety of training courses out there. And like you mentioned before, the HR departments also like it because they can put together their annual training plans according to this.
Exactly, yeah.
And then, yeah, I think our flagship program at the moment is the Maintenance Planner Learning Pathway, which is linked to a qualification, which is another one of these learning pathways. But I think Tim is in a much better position to talk about that than I would. So I think let's hand over to Tim, and if there are any questions, I can maybe take them at a later stage.
Okay, that's excellent, Arnold. Thank you very much. Really valuable input there, and I think that we end off on a valuable point here, and that is that learning pathways can not only help an individual within terms of their own role and guiding their own learning to be really efficient within their role, but absolutely in terms of your training team and your HR team and planning those training plans. I mean, those are not areas where they are specialists. So to have that guidance is really important. So that brings me to our first mentee question. And if you'll all just pop onto your phones or your computers where you logged into the mentee.com, use the code 624997 and answer that first question. We'd be really interested to know to what extent or whether your organization uses learning pathways. And then so that question, do you have a clear learning pathway in your organization, speaks to you specifically. Do you have a clear learning pathway? And therefore follow that. We'll just give a minute or two to do the mentee question, and then I'll move on to Tim because I'm very keen to know more about this. And yes, everybody can participate in the mentee survey.
Karen, while everybody's doing their mentees, maybe I should just make another point, is that we often find that organizations need help about how do we structure our organization. who should report to whom and who should be responsible for what. And quite often we find quite a, I would say, a confusing situation amongst quite mature organizations or clients.
Yes.
Where planners are doing things that they're not supposed to do, or the reliability engineers busy generating reports and being very frustrated. So the point you made about helping them with their careers, clarifying their roles and giving them specific focus, we have found to be hugely valuable.
Absolutely. We've seen that on a number of occasions, and for me it's been surprising because, as Arnold says, it's within relatively mature organizations. But I think it's because, I mean, I know I come from a learning and development background, so I can certainly guide the process, but understanding exactly what needs to be what skills need to be developed within a specific aspect and specifically technical training, that requires specialist input. So great value there. Okay, so I think we might have a whole lot of mentee results in, and I'm going to move ahead and pose a question to Tim, who's all ready to go, I'm sure. And Tim is the person, as I said, who leads up the rollout of the maintenance planner qualification. And I wanted to ask Tim if he could share with us how a qualification like this, like the maintenance planner qualification, actually comes about.
Hi, Corin. Yes. Yeah, well, in South Africa, as you can see on the diagram in front of you, there are three sub-frameworks. So there's a national qualification framework, which is the overarching qualification framework for the country. And then there are three sub-frameworks that make it up. There's the general education, general and further education and training qualification. Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful. So that is basically your school system or your schooling system up until matric. And then in the sort of lighter blue, green type color, I'm a guy, so I think girls might call that teal. I'm getting educated.
Yes,
Higher education, higher education qualification sub-framework, and that is your what's commonly known as your tertiary education, your technical colleges, your universities, all the way up to doctoral degree, master's degree. And then in the orange on the right-hand side is the occupational qualification sub-framework. And this is where trade qualifications now fall in, your artisans, electricians, plumbers, all those artisanal trades. They all form part of that, that sub-framework. And the planner qualification falls into that sub-framework as well. And circled there at level 5, NQF level 5 is the planner qualification. Now, the beauty of the planner qualification is that it's very practical, very skills-based, as all the occupational qualifications are within that sub-framework. But it does mean that the learner needs to have a access to a work environment in which they can practice and apply their learning as they progress.
Okay, that makes sense, Tim, and sounds like a really valuable qualification. Definitely adding the required impetus to the role and, in fact, to the asset management space in general. So the QCTO, as you say, they've got some quite specific requirements with regard to the learner's workplace. For example, stating that they must be employed in a planner role. Why is that?
Well, I mean, it's a requirement that all the learners that register for the planning qualification need to specify where exactly they're going to be doing their practical work experience. It would be unfair to, if you like, subject a learner to an 18-month program if at the end of the day they're not able to actually complete the qualification as a result of lack of access to a suitable workplace. So as the skills development provider, that's the fancy term that a trainer like Pragma would get within the framework. So as a skills development provider, Pragma needs to enter into a workplace agreement with the site that employs the person applying for the qualification. And as one of the criteria for a suitable workplace is going to be that there is a mentor in that workplace who can walk the journey with the learner, get to grips with the practical work, and guide and mentor that person. Typically, the practical part of the qualification will take 6 to 9 months. So it's quite a commitment from the workplace's side in terms of making sure that the practical work is completed. And while doing that practical work, the learner is effectively an apprentice planner in that time. And so it's important that they have the right privileges in the EAM system, and that there is someone suitably qualified to guide them and mentor them.
Okay, and that makes sense, because during that period of time then is when they develop their statement of work, they practice everything that they've learned, they can practice and make errors because they've got their mentor, their supervisors supporting them. They can bring questions back to Pragma. So it is a very supportive environment, and then that builds up the statement of work. I'm wondering if we refer back to the best practice principles that Arnold was referring to. Does Pragma have a learning pathway for aspiring planners, and then what does this learning pathway look like?
Yes, Corin, it does have a learning pathway. That's what's reflected on the screen in front of you, and it consists of 6 courses that are aligned to address the training requirements of the qualification, the maintenance planner qualification. But we've also included in the learning pathway some additional skills that we feel industry would be expecting from such a role. So we have an obligation to ensure that we meet the minimum requirements of the qualification as set out in the curriculum documents. But there's nothing to stop us from putting in additional requirements that we feel would strengthen the role of the maintenance planner within the workplace. And the particular skills that I want to highlight here, if I just grab the pen, is going to be the basic data analysis course in the purple there on the left hand side. So these are the 6 courses: fundamentals of maintenance management, maintenance work management, shutdown planning. Basic data analysis is an addition. So the first 3 are full core requirements of the qualification. Basic data analysis and root cause analysis are over and above the requirements that we've included in the course, are over and above the requirements of the qualification. And then essential non-technical skills is a variety of skills that planners are going to need in order to execute their work effectively. Time management, negotiation skills, how to facilitate meetings, how to write a report, where they use the basic data analysis skills and the root cause analysis skills. So problem solving does form part of essential non-technical skills, but we've given it a bit of extra emphasis through the root cause analysis course.
Okay, I think the end result is a really well-rounded qualification. So It sounds fantastic. Are there any prerequisite requirements to becoming an occupational planner, Tim?
Yes, there are. There's information that the QCTO has mandated as part of the curriculum document, and CETA is the CETA, Sectoral Education and Training Authority, that is responsible as the assessment quality partner for the qualification. So that's why you see both CETA and QCTO logos on your screen. So CETA is the body that sets the final assessment or does the trade test with the learners once they've completed the qualification. As I've said, it's NQF level 5, 261 credits, of which about 150 are the statement of work or the practical application within the workplace, and then it takes about 18 months to do the qualification, and of that 6 to 9 months you can anticipate 6 to 9 months spent on the statement of work. Entry level requirements. NQF level 4 mathematics and physical sciences. So that's the academic matric qualification. And then NQF level 4 with experience in maintenance planning as an alternative. So if they don't have the maths and physical sciences, but have been in maintenance planning for 3 years with a matric, then that would also be acceptable. And then, of course, a qualified tradesperson, which is what we recommend should be the ideal career path for planners coming into the planning process. Yeah, yes. And there we go. We've got some outcomes there in terms of what we aim to provide to the industry. Yeah.
Okay. So when we speak about the planner qualification, we've spoken about it being structured in terms of the perfect way of learning, as well as implementing learning. And I often hear you speak about the 70-20-10 rule, and that we try and structure most of our learning in that manner, but certainly the planner qualification has been structured in that manner. Can you tell us more about the 70-20-10 rule, Tim, and how we apply it?
Yeah, so 70-20-10 is just a model that, the QCTO uses it as well in terms of structuring the curriculum to ensure that there is sufficient practical application in the way that the curriculum is designed. So in the diagram that you've got in front of you, 10% of your program should be structured in such a way as to ensure consistent transfer of information, making information available to the learners in line with the requirements of the qualification. And then there's a practical component to that in the exercises that the learners are required to execute, the homework activities, the forums that they participate in, the submissions that they make in terms of assignments within the course, and a lot of that carries over into the workplace. So not only have they got to hear what good practice is all about in terms of maintenance planning, they also need to take those processes and procedures that exist within their organization and apply the good practices and integrate the processes and procedures that they have in the workplace in order to ensure that there's alignment between what they're hearing as good practice, what they need to do as part of the procedures within their workplace in order to achieve those outcomes that the qualification is designed to deliver to the organization. Because at the end of the day, it's the organization that needs to understand what needs to see benefit from the improved quality of planning that's coming out of the planning department.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is all about that. It's about learning and application of learning into the workplace. There's really no point if that learning cannot be applied and cannot be applied in line with what the company's requires, their strategy, their blueprint as such, as Arnold spoke about. And as learning practitioners, we're told about the forgetting curve and how to make learning memorable and lasting. We have our training development manager who tells us about being empathetic in training and how to get learners to engage. So it really is all about that. It's all about making learning lasting and impactful. And I think that this really does make it stick. So I think I want to link back to the client that we spoke of at the start of the webinar. And they have included the planner qualification training for their planners as part of the holistic approach that Arnold spoke about. So can you tell me more about that decision, Tim?
So yes, on the back of the success of the professional asset management program, the client inquired about the possibility of training their planning and scheduling resources. And hopefully most of the audience here understands that a typical planner can increase the efficiency and the utilization of the maintenance crew that they are delivering the plans for by sort of 30 to 40%. On the slide there it says 45 to 50%. It's real optimization, really leveraging it. So our client saw it as a critical lever to improving the utilization and efficiency of a very scarce skills resource that sits within the maintenance team on site. And so they focused in, they have an objective and a blueprint to ensure that they focus in on any perceived inefficiencies within their operating model to try and minimize the impact of that inefficiency. And planning is one such area that they could do it. And I mean, through the discussions that we had around the maintenance planner qualification, they just realized the practical value of a national qualification to the learner. So now we're not just sending them on training because we've got a training budget to spend or training targets to meet or anything like that. It's these learners are going to walk away with a national qualification, a transportable qualification. So that provides the learners with a sense of desire to finish the program, and then they specifically asked us to incorporate elements of their blueprint that Arnold referred to in the program, so that the linkages between good practice as per the curriculum and the way that their blueprint has been designed and defined are very strongly enforced. And that was the way in which we were able to customize the program, or as Arnold put it, localize it for their operating context, and give them a qualification program. And yeah, we've done some of that localization around their blueprint for that.
So how does that work, Tim, in terms of customizing a qualification? So because, as you've explained, there are specific criteria to a qualification. So how do we get around that?
Well, I mean, the qualification said previously it's a curriculum that is being set by members of industry. So the QCTO has representatives from industry broadly that come together to put together the requirements for the curriculum. And any training provider has to ensure that they meet those minimum curriculum requirements. But as we have in our learning program, we can have additional elements on top of that curriculum that we incorporate into the program, because we know that there is a need for those skills within industry, and it's reinforced by the particularly with this particular client, the need to even add more depth to those elements of it. So by looking and understanding their blueprint, understanding their way of working, we're much more easily able to tie their practical experience into the good practices of the curriculum, and that adds value to the client. It makes the whole change management process of getting the good practices entrenched in the workplace that much more effective, and that much easier to move forward.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Change management process, that opens another whole can of worms that I'm sure we will discuss at some point in the near future. But right now, thanks for your time, sharing all that information with us. I know you've got your hands full with quite a number of learner cohorts at the moment, but it's sounding really positive. So Rosa, I'd like to bring you in at this point and talk about the maintenance planner qualification, just staying with that for a second more. Can this actually be delivered as a learnership?
Yes, that is correct. We are able to register both employed and unemployed learnerships on our maintenance planner qualification. And with the registration of a learnership, as you know, we help our clients benefit from tax incentives as well as B points. Just in terms of the learnership, for us, the 3 role players in a learnership are very important, and they form a partnership. The learner participating in the learning program, gaining knowledge and earning a full qualification. Then the employer providing on-the-job guidance, mentoring and support in the workplace. And then us, the training provider, we will present the theoretical training component.
Okay, thanks, Rosa. That makes sense. I know we have that question often. How many learners do we currently have completing this qualification?
Yep, we currently have 105 learners enrolled nationally, from private individuals in their own capacity to corporate groups, and a growing waiting list for our next intake.
Okay, that's really very exciting. And all of this also runs in our virtual classroom, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So learners are onboarded onto the Academy portal, where they access all their learning material, complete assignments, and interact with their facilitator via the virtual classroom.
So what I'm hearing from you and from Tim and from Arnold, there's a lot of supporting hands in the mix, not just with the maintenance planner qualification, but with the virtual classroom in general, with the facilitators and learning specialists. So what support do the learners receive when they're in the virtual classroom, Rosa?
A lot of support, and you're right.
Yes.
It's absolutely needed. As Tim said, we are dedicated to ensuring a successful and memorable learning experience. Learners have regular contact with their facilitator in the virtual classroom. We also provide a dedicated success coach to all our learners. It's very supportive and highly interactive environment. So you're not learning alone in some dark room. You've got full support. And for the formal qualification, like the maintenance planner qualification, learners have a workplace mentor as well, and work closely with their peers.
Okay, I really like the the fact that we've been able to come with a solution that feels as comfortable as a classroom. And I really think the virtual classroom is a win in terms of keeping learning alive and as we say, literally bringing the classroom to our learners. But as I've said, we're going to chat a lot more about that next week with my team around the virtual classroom, busting some common myths that we've all heard along the way. And for those of you on the call and for those of you who know people who may be interested being on the call, I hope you'll join us again and I hope you'll share the information. But for now, we're about to wrap up and take some questions. I thought that we could just do our second mentee question. So if you could go back onto your mentee screen, key in that code again, and if you haven't got it there anymore, and answer the second question. Tim, if you could put up that slide so that people could see the second mentee question, just in case they have lost their mentee connection. And I'll give a few minutes for everybody to just submit their answer to that question quickly.
Okay, so the question is, how do you feel about the move to the virtual classroom? Unfortunately,
yes.
The slide doesn't reflect that, but the code is up there at the top. If you did manage to fall off the out of the mentee session, the code is there so that you can rejoin it. But hopefully on your phone, you'll see the correct question.
The correct question, yes. 624997, and it is, how do you feel about the move to virtual classroom? And then perhaps we can move on to the next slide and we will take some questions. So Arnold, I can see that you have been looking at the chat box, but maybe for the benefit of the rest of the audience, I see we have a question with regards to how Pragma Academy can help governments manage their assets, such as government buildings, or do we only focus on a private sector?
Yeah, Karen, I've answered that there. Like I said, assets still are assets and they need to be managed and maintained regardless of who owns them. So I said, yes, absolutely. We've done a lot of work with local government and any large asset owner or asset manager, regardless of whether it's private or public. The second question there was where somebody asked, how do we then provide that fifth block, the coaching and mentoring in a virtual environment? And I think Tim gave the answer as well. I think twofold. The one is we have live sessions with them, sort of a question and answer, give advice, coach and mentor via, typically a Teams meeting. And then secondly, they submit evidence to us, either part of a project or some examples of work that they've done, and we review that and give them feedback on that. So I think those are the two parts, and we do that on the planner qualification as well as those projects I spoke about earlier for that big client. We've got mentors coaching and mentoring a lot, well, all the participants doing their projects all over the country.
Thanks, Arnold. I think that answers it really nicely. I don't see any additional questions, so I'm thinking that the webinar covered.
Question.
Melanie?
Yeah, I see.
Okay.
Hi, Karen.
Hi.
So the second question on mentee is a difficult one to answer, because what if a person hasn't been exposed to the virtual classroom?
I think there are a lot of people who haven't been exposed to the virtual classroom, so which is why there's a sort of I don't know somewhere there. But we're assuming that most people have been exposed to some type of online learning, and whether
That's exactly, yes.
Yes, so this is one of the reasons why we decided to break this into a two-part webinar, because our second part will unpack that side, because there's still a lot of fear or uncertainty, or different levels of fear, from fear to uncertainty to maybe, but can I actually get in there? Is it complicated? And so we want to unpack a little bit of that so that people can see that it really actually is, it's as easy as what we're doing right now. It's just a lot more live as such, rather than people sitting on the other side.
If I might add to that.
Sorry, if I can just add, I think there's a lot of confusion as well.
Yes.
Where people think, is this e-learning? I've done e-learning before and I didn't like it, or I found it very boring or non-value adding. So is virtual classroom the same as e-learning? I think there's a lot of those kinds of questions as well, which I think would be useful to unpack and clarify.
Absolutely. So it's going to be a very interesting session. And if we had more time now, we could get into it now, but because it really is very interesting. But thanks, Milani, for bringing that up, and I hope you'll join us in the next session as well. Are there any additional questions? I'm happy to, as I mentioned at the start, we're happy to post we'll include these Q&As on our website so that people can have a look at them. And we have also recorded the session, so we're happy to share if anybody would like it. But I'd like to then wrap up and just thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you especially to my guests, Arnold and Tim and Rosa, and for sharing their knowledge with us. And then, as I say, please join us next Monday as we bust some myths about virtual classroom training. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks.
Yeah, from my side as well. Thank you, everyone, and thanks, Karen, for hosting the session. Cheers, everyone.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Cheers,
Cheers.
Tim.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.